Oh my God, I'm logged in as somebody else.
Disk space is getting low. We're going to have to figure that out. This is Nav. We have a new face on the channel today. We're going to take a look at that. We have a lot to get through. The title of this is Duty to Our Posterity. The question is, what are we going to leave for our children? Do we leave them maybe something to struggle with? Because we don't want to give them everything. We're gonna go through that today. We have John Ward, we have Atlas Thugged, we have Josh Van Ord, and then we have, like I said, the new face. Chuck Mason is on the line with us today. We're going to have a good discussion. I know we're late. You can't rush perfection. Bear with us. We have time. We're playing the long game. It's okay if we're a couple of minutes late, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all for joining us today. And in the chat, give a fire emoji for Frank on this intro.
I stand before you today, a free man. No chains, no masters.
Lost power and rammed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge in the spring, causing it to collapse.
The words that the Key Bridge is gone, it still shakes us.
6 construction workers on the bridge were killed. Hurricane season brought Helene and Milton, storms that devastated parts of the South. Helene killed more than 100 people in North Carolina alone. Protests over the Israel-Hamas war escalated on college campuses. Police clashed with demonstrators across the country while clearing out encampments. Some universities had their commencement ceremonies disrupted, while others canceled their main graduation altogether. The man accused of murdering Georgia nursing student Laken Riley was found guilty in November. Venezuelan migrant Jose Ibarra, who entered the U.S. illegally, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In December, a gunman killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in front of a Midtown Manhattan hotel.
It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes.
The 5-day manhunt ended at a Pennsylvania McDonald's, where police arrested a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate. 2024 marked the first time parents launched 2 NASA astronauts into space for the first time with its Starliner spacecraft. But problems plagued the planned 8-day mission, leaving the astronauts stranded on the International Space Station.
The 4th day of rallies and protests on the streets of Los Angeles.
It was a peaceful rally. What is going on right now is also peaceful.
We are expecting rallies later on.
When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
In Los Angeles, there is a new crowd of protesters that has been building.
CNN had it that these were rallies. Now they've become protests. I'm afraid that by tonight they become riots. If we don't have the ability to stand up and stop this violence before it consumes a great city like Los Angeles, then there's no telling where this could spread.
Let's stop talking. Talking's over. They still want to shoot you. They killed Charlie Kirk. They praised it. They want Donald Trump. They want Chirachik. They want anyone they associate with the right. They want to kill them. They brag about this. They continue on with this. It's been over a month and they're still going on about it. At some point, you got to say, hey, maybe that's me too.
Hello, world champions. I'm John Ward, and today on Breaking News, we are breaking the fake lie continuum. Get ready for 1.21 gigawatts, McFly, because your mind is a boomer expat, and this episode is the Bangkok Ladyboy Softball Club, and hardballs are also okay too. Also that club. Sorry, we know good English. And what I mean by that is, not only is your mind about to be blown more times than a lead in a LeBron James Finals series, it's going to get blown in ways you don't want it to. A horror in the midst of which you will realize this is the real soul crusher. You're paying for it.
A free man, no chains.
Compromise, but it is a compromise nonetheless going to have to be made if we are to ever revamp and rework the system, ultimately in an attempt to circumvent any kind of violent revolution.
This is the future. There is nothing left for us to do. They have taken it away from, they have stolen it from us. They are thieves. They have no idea what is coming.
Today's first reading is going to be brought to us today by Edmund Burke, an Anglo-Irish politician, journalist, and philosopher who is largely considered the father of social conservatism. The quote goes as such as this: "Society is indeed a contract. Subordinate contracts for objects of mere occasional interest may be dissolved at pleasure. But the state ought not to be considered as nothing better than a partnership agreement in a trade of pepper and coffee, calico or tobacco, or some other such low concern to be taken up for a little temporary interest, and to be dissolved by the fancy of the parties. It is to be looked on with other reverence, because it is not a partnership in things subservient only to the gross animal existence of a temporary and perishable nature. It is a partnership in all sciences, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue and in all perfection. As the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living and those who are dead and those who are to be born. Each contract of each particular state is but a clause in the great primæval contract of eternal society, linking the lower with the higher natures, connecting the visible and invisible world, according to a fixed contract or compact sanctioned by the inviolable oath, Lord forgive me, which holds all physical and all moral natures, each in their appointed place," from 1790. The main idea here is that society is a contract. The relationship with the state is a partnership. And the most referenced aspect of that quote is the line, "It becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born." The idea here being that policy is not simply just meant for those who are existing and alive. It's not meant to be a contract over just what is. It is a contract that is meant to honor what has come before and what is to be. And with that in mind, we're bringing about the large topic of what plagues and underpins a lot of the topics and social issues we have in America today, which is this idea of intergenerational injustice. The idea that so much of what we have in our current welfare state and just actionable policies across the board benefit the older generations at the cost of the younger generations. There are a lot of stories we're going to take a deep dive today that will reflect this, but this is kind of the Old Testament, if you will, of some of these recognitions of this problem way back in the late 1700s. Um, but with that, though, I am very excited to get into this, and let's get into it.
Well done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
We got kind of a goofy setup. I'm just going to step in here for a second and introduce. I'm going to be switching cameras on our end, but it is, of course, me, Chuck Mason, if you don't know. What's going on? There he is. What's going on, Chuck?
Hey, brother. How you doing? It's good to be here.
Not too bad. Chuck is going to provide our pushback against us young gentlemen today, maybe a little bit. We'll see. But he has agreed to speak his mind, speak honestly, and he's a fighter. So I look forward to it. Thank you, Chuck, for coming. Sorry it took 45
Can you turn
years.
Chuck up just a touch?
Yes, I can. Chuck, you might want to pull that mic.
All right, while John does that, I'll take Chuck down to little screen. Everybody, welcome Chuck in the chat. Chuck's going to be a probably fairly regular on the show. So we are glad to have the Benjamin Franklin of our time on the panel with us. Hopefully everyone got that. But no, we want to thank Atlas for reading that for us. This is that was Edmund Burke. And we are talking about the social contracts between generations. And I'm glad we have what, 3 generations here? 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 generations. I don't know how that works. I just know we all think differently. But I don't know where y'all want to start.
If fucking fight, you want to skip this show outline and just battle, you little.
Let's go, dude. Duel. We're bringing back duels.
I bet when you take your shirt off, it's just clean. There's just skin. There's zero chest
back the
hair.
Dueling. John's gonna lose.
Just woman's body is what I picture, and I picture you naked a lot, Zeb. So I think I might be right.
If y'all don't know,
I
John's
think you're
real
kind
tall
of
and lanky.
tall and
Fold him
lanky.
into a pretzel.
Just because we're a news show a little bit, part of what we're trying to discern on Sundays is where this all started. By this, I mean America. What is an American? What is America? What is the problem? What's going on? What's going on? We're trying to figure out and hopefully agree upon, less hopeful for that part, our foundation myth, our creation story, if you will. Was it Adam and Eve? Was it trannies on a boat from Jamaica? It could be any of these things.
For sure.
Both of those very old classic ideas. But no, in a serious sense, the reason we're doing this show on Sunday is to figure out what the hell is going on, which is why we've enlisted Chuck. I at least want to get Chuck's thoughts on what the hell is going on. But Edmund Burke, great start off there by Atlas. Atlas set up this entire show. We're going to kind of rotate between who does who does each show. But society is a contract. Can I kick it off by saying a contract as a conscious choice that you make? Because we exist in something called the United States of America, but I don't know that any of us have agreed to the current contract.
No, exactly. This is kind of where the idea of the revolution comes from, right? That man's born free. But when they looked at where they were at, they look at it and they go, we're not born free. We are born into the system we had no say in and we have no representation in. And I think from that is...
No, hold on. Who said that? We got to give him credit. Man is born free, but everywhere is in chains.
That was Rousseau, and he begins the
Chuck
social he follows from the Origin of Inequalities. That begins the social contract.
All right, Chuck,
So
already
that's
trying to
Rousseau.
dunk on
But-
us. Rousseau, he said.
Yes. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, yes.
Jean-Jacques, he's got the first name and it's a hyphenated one, and he knew it. So that would be what would that be in English? John Jack
Rousseau, yeah. But
American.
But I think it's really important. So the social contract of America is breaking down at this point in time, and we all understand that. But it's really important to recognize that there were multiple social contracts coming out of the Enlightenment. And this Burke, Burke's writing in 1790, but the American social contract had already been stated prior to Burke. And it came through essentially Locke, and that there are now 3 different social contracts kind of competing in America right now.
I like it.
So the issue becomes, how are you going to have a united social contract within basically 3 different camps that are fighting for control in the states? And that's going to be the hard part.
I think we got all of them represented right now, maybe all 3. But
no, we don't. We have 2.
What's the third one?
Well, there are 3.
Cut off your dick?
No, there you go. Exactly. You guys gotta go dick, don't you?
That's not my position, Chuck. I just deal with its existence.
But I mean, the fact that you had mentioned Rousseau and man is born, and Atlas, what you had said is really important, because when you had said about people are born free, that was the presumptions under Locke that were bound in that Christian worldview. The other one that came out of the Enlightenment came through Rousseau, and that's what the collectivism is that led to Marx, and now this concept of equity that the left has right now. And the third one is a postmodern worldview that came out of the fallout of the Enlightenment. It wasn't through the Enlightenment itself. And so you got these 3 different camps with these large concepts of what the new social contract should be. And they're all fighting right now over this. But we want to reestablish in many ways this concept that we're born free and have the ability to make our own, individually determine what our lives are. But we're going to, I think it's almost impossible without some level of conflict to figure this one out, because these concepts of these contracts are so divergent that there's no way in the world to, they're so antithetical that there's no way to find any cohabitation.
All right, just to keep that straight in my own head, and then I'll kick it back to you guys. There are 3 competing social contracts as Chuck sees it. Edmund Burke is one of them. The other one that maybe you prefer is Locke. Is that accurate to say? Without the
no, Locke states this. Locke gives this concept of freedom. Man is born free, but that concept of conservatism makes it through, and Locke is kind of looking as this emerges within America, and then it affects England. And what Burke is saying is, yeah, we have this agreement amongst ourselves of what government should be, but Burke is kind of leaning as conservatives back on top of what Locke has already done.
Okay. So that's all one. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have Rousseau, who leads to Marxism and communism,
and he was through. And when you talk about the mayhem of the French Revolution, it was Rousseau that caused the mayhem. It was his writings that caused.
And what was the third one?
Is the postmodern world.
Postmodern. That's right.
Okay. So.
All right. We have a launching point. I know we got a late start, and I feel responsible for it, so I'm trying to do some work to stay organized. So, all right, Atlas, you were saying the John Jack Rose quote. Man is born free, and then we cut you off.
Right. Yeah. Well, the idea that, man being born free, this is, maybe making it more simplistic, more succinct. It's happening again, right? These same realizations are happening again. When you get stories of, say, like this guy being arrested because he shot a drone down over his home, he's being arrested. And now this is now testing, like, can he actually, have dominion over, his own land that he owns? And it's like, actually, no, you don't even own the airspace over your house that you purchased. And there's a lot of other elements that this is hitting. And most particularly, though, the idea there is that they weren't being represented. It wasn't more so just like the taxes. It was the fact that everything being done to them, there was no representation. Now, the collective argument actually has a couple of different kind of breakpoints away from it. And Chuck's actually did a great job bringing in Marx, because that's the kind of the collective of inside of these like certain groups, and that brings in like the oppressor versus the oppressed. Whereas the Burke collective idea is more so like familial. It's like your ancestors, and then your legacy basically thereafter you. So it's not as tied to this idea of there needing to be so much of a power struggle. It's more so as like this reminder that your policy does need to keep in check why you even arrived to the place that you're in now today. Take care of the people that you have here today, but also don't omit all of that for anything that may be consequential to the future. And that's kind of what we lost. I mean, so much of right-wing politics is now full-blown reactionary. It's just like we are in a complete reactionary state and that's largely because we have no control. We're basically just reacting to what the mainstream gatekeepers are doing. And then when it comes to political action too, this is why you see so much balkanization, is because people are scrambling to find someone that represents them, because supposedly nobody does.
I like that. So in a wider picture, we're talking about a contract, not just with other people cohabiting the planet right now with us, but this extends obviously into the past, and we're trying to figure out maybe what went wrong between the past and now, but also what went right. But then also the main crux of today, you put together a great episode, Atlas, is what do we owe to future generations that have yet to be born? Is that sort of accurate?
Exactly. With this idea that so much of what, take example for like things, birthing rates, for example. And this is something where it didn't even matter really, like if you have a religious take on it or not. This is a fact of objectively, it's like if these measures stay in place, it's like, well, we are in for a really rough time, especially with the native born population almost probably not going to exist for very long. And what does that require? And then this brings in immigration as well too. And that's because we don't have a strong outline kind of policy in America of what we should honor, what is American, right? And this kind of goes back to the main question of why New American Vision even exists. And we can't define these things. So if you can't define who the nation is for, you can't define who actually built the nation, you can't define who the nation, like what the nation was supposed to be from those people, well, then you're basically just governing blindly for blind people. And so no wonder it's a mess. And the reason why we can't get to the bottom of this question and answer it, what is an American, and good job for Zeb pushing this, is because there are too many competing factions now, because nobody honored what Burke was saying. We had too long of a period of time of basically people saying, oh, everyone can be an American. It doesn't matter. We're all immigrants. It's like basically this gray soup. But here we are. Now everything's consequential. We very well may be down the path of violence. And I think people are talking about that a lot. And that happens when you don't honor the past and you just blindly expect your nation can operate in some kind of vacuum. That's just not pragmatic.
That's really good. I also really like that you centered this around, as much as we all want to go backward and look for fault and blame, of which I think there is. It's really interesting to frame this as a young guy is how about instead proactively we say, well, what should we do differently to not make these same mistakes if mistakes have been made, or to at least get it. But I think you're right. I think a lot of assumptions are made as a society of forms, and it's all the shared characteristics. You don't really need to explicitly state America is a white European country when everyone is white and European. It's water, right? It's the water you can't see around you.
Right.
But now that the demographics and cultural demographics of the United States has changed, it's really become a point of debate for the first time, because that wasn't something we ever really had to talk about. We all just spoke the same language, looked the same, and were pretty much Christian of some kind.
Right. Exactly. You kind of get this. Well, I mean, you could even go all the way back to Aristotle, right? This idea that, and even to the social contracts, right? You have to have something homogenous for there to be a nation to exist. And when you have balkanization to the level that we're having, which is, I mean, even inside the right wing now has like 9 different camps. And then if you look further into those camps, there's even more balkanization. And that's the result of a long-term non-answering, or rather an omission of an answer, because there is one, of what an American is. And now this has resulted in multiple different avenues, right? So if you look at it in terms of, let's think of something applicable, right? In terms of like debt and finances, now it's national debt. You have some people, in our camp on the right wing saying, who cares about the debt? We need to win now. But what does that do? I mean, you are basically legislating and making actionable policy that you have no idea what the consequences of that will be to your legacy. So you're basically handing off a problem for your children to deal with later on. This is the story of America and the political, scene in America of the last like 100 years, if not longer than that. And I think the question then becomes, where did this start? Who was the first person to say, you know what an American is doesn't matter? And I think that's where everything started to go wrong, is because then you lose the definition of who you are and what you should be. And then thus that decides the barriers for what the nation can and will not be. You lose that. It becomes this all game that we're all a part of now.
I do think there's a component of history that is relevant to this topic, like you say, Atlas. But I think asking who was the first person to say to basically water down what does an American mean is kind of like asking the frog, at what temperature did it really start to get hot? You know what I mean? Yes, it is important. And the truth is we know, I forget. I say we know, I forgot the guy's name, but he's the first guy to say America's a melting pot. Him, other people. And I guess I think the more poignant question is, where do we go forward? And if I could ask Chuck, actually, because Chuck, you kind of mentioned that I forget the exact wording, but you basically insinuated you don't see a political solution to this. Or am I mischaracterizing that?
No, you're absolutely right. And just, I want to backtrack once. When you guys talk about, the end of the story about what does it mean to be American, that's postmodernity right there. I could break that down at some other point. Okay.
We'll get to it.
That was where the attack on the narrative of what it meant to be an American, where that really started. And that really came in the 60s. And you could track the intellectual movement of that through. But the reason why I say that, Josh, is the left right now is essentially Marxist. Most of them don't even know it. They've adopted this collectivist mindset that came through Rousseau and through Marx. And there is simply, at this point in time, no way to put this genie back in the bottle. You've now the concepts of an individual having the ability to determine their sovereignty, like Atlas had said, and this was all governed by the Judeo-Christian worldview, or a Christian worldview. Now you're dealing with this concept of collectivism, where people need to surrender their rights for what the elites say are the good of society, where that Marxist concept comes in, and now it's equity. It's on every level in basically a post-Christian world. There's no way to synthesize the two, and there's never been, because this is the battle that played out in Vietnam. It's played out well within the Russian revolutions and within China and Cambodia and Vietnam, when this concept of freedom that they had lost. So that's the battle that's here. And this is what's exactly the second book that I'm writing right now.
Oh.
So yeah, there's no way to put this genie back in the bottle at this point in time.
Right. And the battlefield is actually different too, because what's actually kind of lost in this is when the founding fathers were kind of faced with this choice. They're faced with this choice of you have to circumvent. You're going to have to go out of the bounds of what typically is acceptable for what is social change. Now, back then, it was obviously the tolerance level for social change was very minimal. I mean, basically, if you're making a ruckus or you're making the king look like an idiot, they're just going to execute you or they're going to do something to you. They're going to shuffle you off the board. But they didn't do accelerationism. And accelerationism is this kind of newly brought up concept and is kind of nihilistic in a sense, but not really if you look at it in a more robust worldview. But the idea here is that now we are faced with the idea of should we accelerate, right? If there is no political solution to this, would that not then does that not imply then that we should end it as soon as possible to start rebuilding as soon as possible, right? Is that not the easiest solution? But then again, what does that bring about? That automatically suggests there is harm entailed into that. And thus you have this very toxic and obfuscatory way to have this conversation, which is we all have to kind of dance around very real consequences that could happen very quickly if not addressed, if this is the direction we choose to go. And this is why you see people going, I'm going to vote for Kamala. I'm going to vote for Gavin Newsom. I will vote for whatever brings this system to its knees because I too don't think there's a political solution.
People on our side, you mean? Sorry, I was just saying, Atlas, you're talking about people on the accelerationists that are ostensibly right-wing will vote for left-wing candidates in order to burn it all down faster, right?
Right. And that all stems from the fact that they don't feel they're being represented. And additionally, they feel like that vote is like entitled to them. So they're almost like in a frustrated way, you'd be like, you know what, I know she's bad, but like you're not getting my vote just because you think you
I would agree that once you're convinced there's nothing left to be done, it is logical to become what we now call an accelerationist. I mean, how could it not be? Just ignoring whether or not that's true specifically now, I agree with your logic for what it's worth.
Can I add one final thing to Josh? I really should nuance this, Josh, and to say that there is no political solution if conservatives and people want to continue doing what they're doing, which is this. 99% of people are not getting involved. They're angry, they're expressing whatever, but they could make a huge change in the world if they simply voted for their school boards.
Yeah.
And they got this, and they put hardcore this social contract back into our schools. It might take a generation or two. But if you started to educate kids about the difference between these social contracts, why this contract of Burke and what came through the original founding of America is so critical for our freedom, if we began to educate along those lines and began to homeschool, if we put in efforts, but that takes too much time away from people's lives agendas. And people are so drunk on wealth in America that and I've worked in local politics for so long, that they don't want to get involved. They'll watch podcasts, they'll bitch and complain, but don't ask them to get involved. They simply don't want to do it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that that's something we had talked about many times on Zeb and I's show Outside the Overton, where it's how like this, we completely agree that everything would be better if everyone just got involved. So I guess the question is, what is going to be the catalyst that gets people involved? And I get that's what y'all are talking about with accelerationism. My concern is like I do think there is a point of no return. I do think we can accelerate to a point where it's just not coming back, not in the way we would like it to. And
little Max, little Beyond Thunderdome, that kind of thing.
As much as I would like that to happen, I don't think it's possible. But if
we're talking about bad outcomes,
I'd be an accelerationist too.
Well, how about the fact that less than half of the country voted in the last national election? I mean, we're already at a point. Oh, go ahead. My bad.
No. You're absolutely right. Just that's all I said. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're just agreeing.
Yeah. Well, so I'm kind of looking at it from the fact of like, Jeff Younger's drilled this into my head quite a bit, and this has kind of honestly been what's doctored a lot of my takes recently. Is I'm choosing to be pragmatic. And the idea here is if we already had, I think it was like 47% of the nation voted in the last election, like entirely, whether it was for Trump or Kamala. And then
40% eligible voters,
you look, right? If we keep going down this path, what happens if only 30% of the country is voting? I mean, we're going down a very, very dark path where pragmatically, then that means two things. For one, canvassing efforts will be a lot more kind of, targeted to the people who actually are voting. But on the other end, how do you tail to an audience if the majority of your audience says there also is no political solution? And then it will begin to really kind of warp what is going on in the political discussion. And if you have, say 60% of men decide in their country it's not worth to affect political action, I mean, it will then continually make the problem rapidly worse, because it will then only be the people who are like annihilating our values in this country will be the ones actually affecting any change. And then at that point, it's game over.
Are we is post-Castro Cuba, when Che fuckhead Guevara, actually is super interesting. I like reading about Che, but he was really stupid on some stuff. He implemented all their dream socialist programs, and then everybody just quit. That happened in Cuba. They just were like, nah.
It happens in every socialist country. I mean, every time they get the ground hold like that.
Well, to Josh's point of that, it can go wrong. But I mean, is Cuba permanently done? It just since the French Revolution, a few hundred years, which is the blink of an eye, we've seen, I think, every fucking political system on the planet form and fall apart. This stuff is I'll be this asshole that steps back. Number one on the voting. Do we believe the vote counts are accurate? Because we're being hypocrites. I think we need to, not on this show, but we need to figure that out. Is voting real or not? And if it's not fucking real, then we got to stop making arguments for certain cases where we do believe it is real. I'm kind of inclined. I'm a conspiracy guy on this one. Fuck knows how many votes are actually getting. I don't think we know. But assuming it's 50%, well, then you can start to attack this with our model. What is the problem? Almost like the majority of people don't give a shit. That's the problem. They just don't fucking care.
So can I add a little bit here? Just 2 points of information, Josh.
Yes, you can slightly improve my perfect comment.
So when we talk about we don't have a political voice, I think people have a larger political voice than they really think they do.
Yes.
Let me give you 2 examples. One that is coming up here in Pennsylvania. If you really want to understand how this works, you can see this coming up in the vote in Pennsylvania in a week, a little over a week. The first is, when I was doing local politics, it dawned on me, and I think I might have said this before. I have a red Solo cup on my kitchen counter. I got a blue collar business. My change goes in that Solo cup. When you pour that into the change machine, it's about $30. There are 40,000 freaking registered Republicans in Center County alone.
Mm-hmm.
If each one time a year would save a cup's worth of change and donate that, it's $1.2 freaking million for us to win school board elections and local elections. Do you understand? If each one of those people would donate 3 hours, 1 day a week, that's the equivalence of 60 full-time people.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a political difference would that make in our county alone? And they won't do it. Now, as it relates to as it relates to the election coming up, when you talk about exactly what you said, our election insecurity here in Pennsylvania is because of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. When Governor Wolf switched out dropped the signature match, that wasn't constitutional, but it went through a state Supreme Court that was Democrat because Pennsylvanians, me included, overlooked. We didn't know who the hell was on the ballot in terms of state Supreme Court, and Democrats strack the court. We have the ability to do a basically a no confidence vote and throw 3 of these guys off the state Supreme Court and reelect at another time in another year conservative judges. It'll show you how much conservatives actually care and whether they want to be involved in a political solution, as to whether Republicans in the state get out and undo what they did. And we'll see what that really happens. So it's really as simple as taking your spare change and going to vote that can make a difference. But if people are unwilling to do that, Josh, that's why we're screwed.
I want to just add to, I don't think we know, Chuck, that everybody has been exposed to that message. I think that's part of the problem. We don't have a complete reach with the Republican voters, and I don't know if it's the local party or a lack of funding or whatever. But like, I certainly had not heard you ever say that, but now that I've met you and you said that, I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. So I think there's probably some people that would do that. But again, I'm getting tired of getting so frustrated. I want to blow my head off for how dumb everybody else is. The fact of the matter is, it's a good idea, but they will not do it.
I shopped that.
Why is the question? Why? What is going on?
I don't know. I shopped that to some of the highest levels of the state GOP leadership. Said, hey, you want to set this up 3 hours in a red Solo cup? Well, and they were like, whatever. They just
just a branded mark. Yeah,
we can move on.
It's a great idea. I want to ask Josh and Atlas and Zeb. Like, it's obviously you guys are involved, but you know a lot more people younger than Chuck and I do. Like, I want to talk for just 2 minutes at least. Is why doesn't that shit work? Why will people not do it? Do you have any insight into that?
Yes. I'll take the lead because I was going to actually push back on Chuck actually a little bit ago. So I personally have myself looked multiple times throughout the last couple of years into what it would take to actually be involved myself personally on a state level in Ohio politics. And this was because I was looking up when Bernie Moreno was up for election. I think he was up against 11 different people. And I kid you not, as I looked into all 11 candidates that were up on that ballot, every single one of them was not worth even the bit of paper their names were printed upon. Yep. And I think this is actually the fact that the right wing, the audience, right, the right wing, the people, has moved so vastly to the right that for me to actually be an honest, do what I want to do, I would have to lie to my local community if I wanted to get elected and do what I want to do. Because if I came into it honestly about my actual values, I wouldn't be able to affect change at all. I'd get ran out of the town. The second thing is the fact that I don't think that what shifts the cultural comes from the grass up. I think it comes from the top down. And so I think there's evidence of that from like people like the reactionary group from like the John Doyles and the Captive Dreamers who latch themselves onto J.D. Vance because he's now making some more of the based kind of quips that we're used to getting from Trump in 2016. So that's what I'm saying. I think the reason why young kids don't want to get into it is because the change they would impact in the local community would be minimal, and it wouldn't be the stuff that they're passionate about, which would be Christian nationalism, putting women back in the kitchen, race realism, and I mean, the list goes on, but that's toxic material to local communities, which is why people choose not to do it in the first place.
Well, and I think to kind of go off of that, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is it essentially boils down to varying factors of the young people just don't have faith in the system at all. Like I went and visited a friend of mine over the weekend in a small town in Southern Virginia, and he lives in a very small town. Everyone knows each other, and he is now going to local school board meetings. And it's because he knows everybody there. Like even here in Florence, South Carolina, the communities are so disjointed that no one really feels at home. They only feel at home in their homes. And even then, sometimes they don't there. And so that's kind of the overarching thing is you get someone like Atlas said, it does come from the top down. Like, I think that's why Donald Trump was so effective, because he was essentially a populist. He was the one basically giving people permission to want a border wall. They may, like until then, they just did whatever they may have wanted one deep down, but they never admitted it to themselves or even thought about it because that's not what the people above them were saying. And so that's kind of the thing is to get people involved is one thing, but it's not simply, okay, the world is bad because Republicans lose and Democrats win. The Republicans are a part of the problem too. And I know you know this, Chuck, but like that's the thing is the youth is just hopeless all around.
I understand. We've talked about this before, and I said this in the podcast that when we were doing this before NAV, which is I totally agree with you. I mean, remember, I grew up under Reagan. I was in high school and college during Reagan. So I saw what this was like. And, JFK, who is a Democrat right now, would be one of the best conservative candidates out there if he were to run as a Republican. So I totally understand about the drift, and I totally get where you're coming from. I will say that this is where a disconnect is going to come because, Atlas, when you talk about, race realism and Christian nationalism and some of these other things, these are extremely foreign concepts to me. And in many ways, they're very disconcerting from where I'm coming from. And while I understand the concerns, I don't agree with the fundamental assumptions and what is driving them, but that's part of your generation, and it is part of my concern. So I get where the hopelessness breeds this, and it's not without its that hopelessness is not without its merit.
That was a super well said, politically strategic language statement there, Chuck. That was, you guys get what he's saying to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I mean, I completely agree.
Your retort? Josh looks like he wants to fight. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I guess I was going to say, like, you don't get somebody like passionate and it's like a Donald Trump figure or like a Charlie Kirk figure or like a Nick Fuentes figure unless like they are exceptionally passionate about that issue. And maybe this is the byproduct of the fact that the mainstream media lied to people for like our entire lives. But I think that there is a strong disconnect with how, so like the disconcerting aspect of it. And I understand that, and we can have longer conversations about it, but that's something I see very commonly, which is there's a ideological split. It's not even just like one that's on the level of right versus left. This is one that's moved, I mean, so far that you're exactly right. It's now almost a foreign concept. But these foreign concepts that I'm talking about, I would argue, are closer to the actual original ideas of the founding fathers. And so we're once again coming back to this inflection point where you have a growing period of the youth, and they don't feel like they're being born free. They feel like they're being born into a generation where people are basically telling them, you put the blue cloak on if you want to be gay, and put the red cloak on if you want to pretend to be a man. And it's just like, why would I even want to participate in that in the first place?
Josh.
Zeb's there.
My response, is that what we're waiting on? I mean,
if you have one.
Sorry, our audio is a little. What'd you say, John?
I'm just saying, yeah, your response, if you had one. That's all I was saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Atlas kind of took the words out of my mouth. I agree. I think my tact when it comes to this stuff is kind of like to what Atlas was saying is, why is someone like Nick Fuentes so effective? Why is someone like Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump effective? It's because they're authentic. And when, like, I'm not the biggest fan of John Doyle, but when John Doyle says things like it's a theater kid occupied government, he's absolutely right. Where basically the days of like statesmen, these entrepreneurial free, I don't know if free spirit's the right word, but these like titans sacrificing their time for a sense of civic duty to run the government, those days are over. Now it's, I'm going to try out to be a politician and basically sell myself in front of sponsors to see if I can get in. And if if they like me, if they think I'm handsome enough, if I can fake a good enough speech, then so be it. But the thing is like every single one of these people is a human being. They can't fake it forever. And that's why you get someone like Obama comes on the scene. And Obama is like, people criticize, they bring up how he basically came out of nowhere. He was just all of a sudden a senator, and then he was all of a sudden president. But with that, I think that fast track breeds authenticity. I think with Donald Trump, it's the same thing. I think JD Vance, he's a little bit of a dweeb, but like you see the same thing. This almost like fast track. There's the half-life of authenticity hasn't worn off yet. And my point in bringing that up is to say that when you lose that authenticity, which is what all of these politicians do, they get up and we are going to blah, 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 and it's just like a droning on speech. People that can't read can pick up on that. You know what I mean? So the point being is like, we need to get people caring again. And the question is, where do we start? And it sucks because I wasn't involved in politics until Donald Trump came on the scene. He's who got me passionate. And I think it's safe to say a good majority of us feel let down.
Well, wasn't the quote from the French Revolution, the men started acting up when their wives started complaining?
No, not quite.
It might all come down to
not
that.
Quite. No, not quite.
Bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks might be the great inscription on the final monument to humanity when the sun explodes. It'd be fucking Biggie Smalls. He had it right from the beginning. So I think this is great. Where do we start? I would say where we start is trying to figure out why everyone has quit, and I would argue we've already figured that out. It's the lack of hope is what allows a population to start accept being treated like slaves. So, I think we saw this play out with Trump. There was a total lack of hope on the right. Trump shows up in 2016, and he just, you're going to say I'm saying dick shit, Chuck, but he did. He just literally skipped all the rhetoric and just pulled his balls out.
I would never say that. I would agree with you completely.
You agree? Yeah.
What he did.
It was just such a mind fuck for me, having been used to politics up to that point.
Right. And I totally agree with you on that. I wouldn't disagree. My only thing was he went into that first administration being the host of the, whatever his damn program was, and he was not set up as a statesman to run. He learned his lesson.
He did.
But had he had this mindset in the first thing, we missed 4 years with that.
Let me throw that. I think we've learned from the past 10 years that people do not follow ideas. They follow people. We are still much more of a pack animal than we like to think of ourselves as. This is my monkey shit talking, so bear with me. You can disagree. But I think humans are actually still doing fine in terms of the way they're naturally wired. And despite these weird, unnatural rules being placed around us, we're a zoo animal in a cage that was raised in the wild. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, especially if you're older. And so you start to get these institutionalized behaviors from this free-spirited animal that cannot escape and doesn't understand its prison. The monkeys, they would not eat. They would do incest and weird sexual things. They would smear their shit on the walls and make great modern art. It's shockingly similar to the degradation of society and culture and art and thinking that's happening literally right now. To me, it's not that different than watching a bunch of orangutans in a concrete cell, and we're doing the same shit. So I would put out there anyway, and then I'll shut up. The reason nobody is doing anything, the reason the red cup change thing doesn't work, the reason is because the belief that it will actually do anything is totally gone. I think people actually do think it's I don't think the issue is them being too stupid to understand it's a good idea. I just think if you were able to get them to be honest, they would be like, I just don't think it's going to work. Like, everything's fucked. I've given up. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to pay my bills. I just don't know what to do. And it's that kind of thing that has led me and us to, well, we're not quite ready to give up yet, guys. Let's at least, I don't think we've made a serious effort to deal with any of this shit. But yeah, it seems everybody on the right approaches this logically, like a business owner, like a numbers guy is, all right, the ideas aren't working, so we put X amount of money into it. We send out this many ads or flyers to this demographics. This could all be skipped and just get people like Trump, and people who are apes, pack animal apes, will follow that guy. We're missing leadership. I don't even, the ideas are great, but I think there is a much more human ape type thing that we're missing, which is just dudes with big balls that will throw them out there. That's what Trump did.
That's kind of what I was I'm kind of answering my own question, which what I think the solution is for right now. Now, obviously time changes. The solution now isn't going to always be the solution. It hasn't always been the solution, but essentially is you touch on a very important point, John, that I completely agree with is at my job, we constantly complain about how, oh, people don't read. If people got involved, if they did this, if they just read the local paper, then they would be awake to the issues. They would be passionate and they would try to change things. But we're complaining about human nature. It's not that people once, I mean, yes, people were more involved, but why were they more involved? Because there was a greater sense of community. They've lost this sense of community. They've reverted to their baseline nature, which is this sense of basically hopeless apathy. So I think
no internet and smartphones probably helped a lot.
Exactly. So I think that we recognize that there is this there is this animalistic nature about us and we complain about it. But I think the right thing to do is recognize it and harness it. And what I think the actual solution is, I know obviously we're doing it, but like what we're doing right now, because I think we're in an, we talk about like the age of information. What we really are in right now is an entertainment age. People get all of their information through podcasts. Like you were talking about, Chuck, they get their information through stuff like this. They're not combing through the data. There's so much data, it would blow any normal person's mind. They rely on people like us. They rely on people like Nick Fuentes.
They didn't just go pick up Edmund Burke and start reading it, you're saying? I don't believe you.
Exactly.
So,
well, funny enough, this whole numbers. Oh, go ahead, Chuck. My bad.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to just bring up, John Ward touched on the numbers aspect, right? And how the right wing is kind of just pushes numbers and logic and facts as if like that's going to win people over. And clearly that's been a failing plan and failing strategy for a while. I'd like to bring up GLR, George Lincoln Rockwell, identified this well long ago. And it's kind of been the foretelling of why we have lost so much youth to the left, right? This has always been what the right has struggled with, is maintaining support from the youth. And that's because they don't have anything that speaks to the hearts and minds. Instead of J.D. Vance going up on stage and saying, we're deporting them because they don't belong here, he says, well, we're deporting them because, well, the certain numbers in the traffic in LA on I-75 says, and it's like, that doesn't vibe with anybody. What vibes with your audience is saying what they also feel, which is deporting people because they don't think they belong here. And that's also a
parable, right? Like how Jesus, we need they're not here for the same reason there's not a bunch of white Americans in Mexico, something like that. Like that's
right. Yeah. Speak to it.
Because it's not Mexico. So, and we're not there because it's not America. It's just, just the common sense. It's one of also the things that made Trump so fantastic because he was fundamentally an entertainer. He did the bikini shit. He did The Apprentice. I think that was actually him practicing, honestly. Like, you think he planned that shit for 20, 30 years, but when everything that won people, I mean, I don't know how well you guys remember 2016, but he was not the favorite at the beginning. They treated him like he was a joke. But he would just say, I mean, it was Christ-like in concept, if not content, right? It was not shit Jesus would have said that way, but he was using parabolic little funny meme stories. And he skipped all the numbers. Go ahead, Chuck.
He's a crass version of Reagan.
He's really a crass Reagan.
Absolutely. He's a debased version of Reagan, meaning Reagan had when Josh, you talk about, which I want to know what Zeb thinks.
Reagan
really
was fucking funny.
But I about all this, but Josh, you talk about we don't have any statesmen any longer. And remember, and this touches Atlas to basically Burke, okay? Was the statesman, and I know because I grew up with them, those people that you talk about that we don't have any longer were essentially World War II and Korean veterans.
Yeah.
Very few of them were from the Vietnam generation. And they believed in that American concept of virtue that was guided by a Christian worldview, period. And so they were not going to settle on principle to gain something or to be liked or anything along those lines. But that's what the contract was built on. You can talk about contracts all you want, but those contracts are undergirded by a certain fundamental set of assumptions that define what the contract is going to be, that the bulk of your society agrees with. When you disconnect from those assumptions and when those are attacked and you give up on those, then the contract begins to break down. And those guys believed in those principles and they fought and they died and they fought and they bled for them, so they weren't giving up.
Well, and I mean, there's a great, if you young guys haven't seen it, Reagan was a great, he had some incredible one-liners in his campaigns. He also was an actor, like a good-looking leading man. If you didn't know, he was like Brad Pitt who became president. That's literally Reagan. But he has this great one-liner where his second, I think, Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Mondale, his second election? Was that Mondale?
Yeah, it was the line about age.
Yeah. Have we done this before? He just has this great one-liner. He was old as shit. He was like Biden versus Trump. He was like 80. And he knew they were going to call him out on his age, and sure enough, they did. And so he says, yes, and this is a debate, nationally televised. Yes, I understand I am much older than my opponent, but I won't hold his lack of experience against him or something like that.
The line
I'm sorry, Chuck. You do it, Chuck.
I watched this.
Chuck was there.
The press said, do you think age should become an issue in this campaign,
right?
Pointing a finger at him, and he said, "Well, I do," but he said, "I refuse to hold my opponent's youth and inexperience."
Yeah, that's right. His youth.
He just flipped. He was the communicator.
But no numbers, no all 80-year-olds. There's 97% as good as the none of that shit. Just fucking joke. Everybody laughed. He won. I think Mondale said that's the point. He realized he was going to lose bad. Was that comment?
He knew that.
Probably knew before that, but
yeah.
So anyway, Reagan is. I know Reagan is. Maybe we have slightly different ways of looking at him, but not to get into Reagan. But I just want to tie back to that concept of like, to me, Trump and Reagan and Obama for the left. Obama was not a facts and numbers guy. He was hope and change. Vote for me. Look at all that hope you just got. Look at all that change. Doesn't mean
Slogan
anything,
king.
but fucking word.
Yeah, weird comic book
no
style.
Surprise that the two good right-wing ones we have one was a professional actor and one was a TV host and entertainer like Trump. So I mean, it's like those guys get it. It's a performance. We're out here.
I was just going to add on there
with autistic
going back
shit,
to what Chuck had said, which was this idea of obviously this underpinning of what the social contract is, and you start to lose that, it unravels. That automatically implies there needs to be mechanisms that keep people tied to the social contract. And for America, that would be Christianity, right? The values of Christianity. And that's like what we have lost. There's no mechanisms. In fact, people work tirelessly from the left to make sure those mechanisms are removed. And then they'll even fight you and gatekeep you on the right if you want to bring them back. But that's kind of the last point I wanted to bring there before we kind of bring it up to speed with a modern application of this Lord. And that's the fact of Social Security. Social Security, most people are pinning, is going to probably be the first consequential thing that probably will explode, that will really going to explore this intergenerational injustice. And when you have figures and projections showing that like hospital insurance, like HI, Social Security is going to be insolvent in 8 years, it's on this trajectory. You know, they're going to downsize payments by like 23%. And you have a state-run Ponzi scheme, right? And this is one of these elements that gets people very irritated, because you have a lot of older people who are probably getting ready to retire and get the benefits from it, while you have people in the youth going, I'm never going to see anything from this. I want to stop paying into it. You need to cancel it now. And so how do you negotiate two distinct groups that have two distinct wants from a program that's harming one and benefiting the other?
I think that's you're up, Chuck, on this one.
Do you want an answer from
unload, baby? Yeah,
give it to us straight.
Yeah,
give me your take on Social Security
right now.
Give it to us straight, Chuck.
Right. So I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna answer what you had said, and then you need to put Social Security back into the bigger picture of entitlements in general. And I know I can say this because I put an article on American Thinker about this back in December. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been paying into Social Security all my life. And so everybody at my stage is saying, hell yeah, I paid into it. I want to get paid. I do not blame you guys one bit at all. However, you guys are in a far better position than most of the people who are into their late 50s and early 60s from the standpoint of, you know, if you based your retirement on taking Social Security at my stage, you want to have it. You don't want to see any downsizing or lose it. Even though you're right, it probably becomes insolvent. You guys are young enough that even though you're paying into Social Security, if you start investing at this early stage in life, even $100 a month, you'll end up with about $1 million when you go to retire, provided that we still stay on the trajectory that we are. So, you know, I hear what you're saying about Social Security and these old people that you are looking at as an injustice. Remember, they built the America that you're sitting in right now. And and if you don't like America, well, then, the same thing could be said to you. Go ahead and live in Cuba right now and see what you think.
Give me my money back, Chuck.
All right. They will not like that. But I'm going to put this back into a larger set of entitlements. Okay. 66% of the federal budget, almost 70% of the federal budget is entitlements, of which about a third is Social Security. So it's not just Social Security. If we only had Social Security,
sure,
it would be solvent. But when you go back and look at the entitlements, from cradle to grave, somebody somewhere will always be benefiting from a system, whether they know it or not, whether they're SNAP payments for single mothers, or whether we're getting a healthcare benefit somewhere, or something along the line. If you have kids and you're self-employed and you are making certain income levels, then you get the child payment. I can't remember what it's called. You actually you don't pay any taxes. You get money back from the government every year. And the people getting that, who don't like what's happening with Social Security, bank that check on an ongoing basis. So the Social Security is lumped into a larger entitlement segment that was built over generations, because in order to get elected, somebody gave somebody something. And once it gets built in, you can't pull it back. So as this monster has grown and we haven't held anybody accountable, we just figured all it'll well work out in the end. So Social Security is bankrolled into all of that. So I hear what you're saying and I understand that. But the bigger issue is that it's the entitlement spending that's killing us in America. And everybody benefits. Nobody wants to give everything up. And until we solve that in total, we're going to be strapped with what we're strapped with.
Well, a couple of things I'd respond back to that with. The first would be that on average, the person paying into Social Security is poorer than the person receiving the benefits from it. The second would be, you are correct in the fact it's rolled into greater entitlements. But if you look at all entitlements as it's put up against native-born U.S. Citizens versus legal immigrants versus illegal immigrants, I believe it's like less than 37% is actually going to native-born U.S. people. And so I guess my option to that would be like, there should be a simple option of me being able to opt out of it. But if we put that on the table, the millions of people who will automatically select to opt out of it, they don't want that either. So the idea here is, how do you fix it?
Well, I think Chuck did make one really good point that hit with me, which is, if I was older and had paid into the system my entire life, you're damn right, I would feel like I deserve to
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Right. That makes it actually really tricky.
But Atlas, remember, everybody's been Ponzi'd on this. So what I pay in, I've been supporting my parents or the older boomers or things like that. It's only the fact that we're running $38 trillion in debt, and we're giving so much of which I totally agree with you. We're giving too much to the illegals and all of those things. We're giving too much in that regard is where this injustice. So this injustice, as I see it, is broken over a lot of different lines. It's not just that the 70-year-old baby boomers or 80-year-old baby boomers, are benefiting off from something. I don't see, and I think that's that concept, like what they did as an injustice to you. I don't think that's accurate, because the boomers didn't do anything. They paid into a system. I paid into a system. It is the politicians over time who have bled that system dry where the injustice comes in.
Well, I think the argument, Chuck, is this: it's not the same world that the boomers lived in. There's problems we deal with now. Like, if we had the same youth they did, I don't think any of us, and maybe you guys can join in here, if the country was the same as it was in the 50s, none of us would be complaining about paying into Social Security. Is that accurate?
Right. I mean, you would be roping in the fact that you could work as a mechanic, and basically that could be your career. Right.
To say to you, like, I don't think any of us, we don't want to fuck over the older members of our tribe or family. We do want to help them. But I think an interesting point Atlas makes, which seems to be true, is that it's become an extraction of wealth from people that don't have any.
Totally understand.
And it's being given to people that actually do have quite a bit.
But remember that what you've mentioned, Atlas, is a broader. That's a canary in the coal mine for a broader social decay. The fact that we're here and we don't have the 1950s ability happened for a variety of issues. So it's not just about Social Security, but Social Security, as we see it today, is just a casualty of this broader loss of our social contract that we had. So, I totally understand you could focus on that, but I think the bigger issue is to recognize that we've got, if we could stench this cultural decay, then we're going to stop that's creating these problems.
There's other stuff we could get rid of, and then Social Security would be fine. Let me ask you this quickly, Atlas, and then I'll shut up, I promise. But Chuck, I want to hear your answer on this. If we had to choose one or the other, let's imagine that Social Security cannot be extracted from the wider picture. It's going to either cause a collapse or it needs to be removed. Should society sacrifice the older population, or should it sacrifice the younger one if it had to?
I think that there is enough money within these other programs, Atlas, that you had talked about going to illegals and other things. And the other thing that nobody mentions, the thing that is probably one of the biggest leaders to social decay is single parenting. Okay, the fact that you're supporting so many single mother households in America. That you do. So there are so many other areas that you could cut money.
Chuck, you trying to flip this on women?
I am.
Let's make them take this point.
Say the men can't keep their dick in their pants and fail on their kids. So with the issue,
hold on, I want to squeeze you for an answer because I already cut off Alice and I want to let him talk. But if you had to let go one or the other, the old group or the young, what would you do?
Well, you straw man me on something. I'm
attacking your bias as an older man. I'm trying to.
No, I think that I want to see entitlement reform across the board.
I see.
Okay. I agree with that.
Alice, sorry, go ahead.
First, I'll answer the question. I think, to go to the story I bring up all the time, right, which was the Japanese nuclear plant that fell apart. The older youth held back the young people, and they said, no, we lived our lives. We're going to go clean up the stuff and do as much as we can, so we're not giving 7-year-olds radioactive poisoning. The second thing I would say to that too is Social Security is actually flawed from its inception, and this is what I mean when I say that. Social Security, when it was designed, which I believe was from FDR, the life expectancy was 62, and the age of retirement for Social Security then was 65. And then nowadays, the average life expectancy is 79. But I think if you're born after the 1960, you have to wait until you're 67 to get benefits from Social Security. So what you have is like the system that was built then, and I have a graphic here I'm looking at now. There was very 100%. Few people that actually made it to that point. They were actually getting benefits from Social Security. And back then, I think it was in 1950, there were 16 workers for each retiree. In 2010, there was about 3 workers for each retiree. And now it's getting to 1.9 in 2030 projections. But on a long enough timeline, you're going to have, less workers than people actually receiving benefits from. So on a long enough timeline, the way that it's actually set in stone, it needs to be reformed regardless, even separate from the rest of the entitlement program. Now, whether that's if you bring maybe the age of retirement up to like 71, I mean, I don't know what the best solution to that would be, but the idea is if it's kept as is, it's going to result in even worse problems.
You're 100% right. That to me falls under the concept of total entitlement reform. And to go back to what you and Josh had said, Josh, nobody has the balls to step up to the plate on either side of the coin and say, we're going to do anything. We're going to cut a benefit. We're going to say you can't get Social Security until you are 60.
Chuck, I'll sacrifice your Social Security right now.
I'm sure you would.
I'll do it.
All right, you sacrifice your lungs on an ongoing basis.
I'll willingly sacrifice everything you have. So selflessly.
So you're at least you are 100% correct. You're totally right. And we're only living longer. So
it's, I think it sounds like, Chuck, that you're saying there's just so many other things to get rid of before Social Security. I think also, have we agreed that supporting your older population in perpetuity is not a bad thing? Like that we would love to be able to do that, wouldn't we? I think we would.
Right. Well, again, this is a government program that it's assisting socially for something that should be getting taken care of by the families. And this goes to generational wealth transfer. So this program in and of itself is already assisting something that people should be doing by themselves anyways, which is setting up savings, having plans for when you can't walk upstairs. Maybe you need to live in a 1-floor home, all of these things, but nobody does it. And that again ties back to this original kind of broader point, which is why people aren't even getting involved. It's because there's just so much going on. Everyone's miserable that it ends up just being, it's easier to sit on the couch, but we wonder why these problems never change. Forgive me.
Let me throw this idea out there is, so there's a psychological effect where if you take somebody who is doing something they love to do for free, like, I don't know, making wood carvings, and they do it all day long for free without any intervention, they just cranking out carvings. Once you start paying them for it, they will do it less and less and less and less and less and less. Has codifying Social Security, like if we got rid of it, do you think the society and the contract would come back and it would, like, is that ripping the Band-Aid off? Is the best way to get good Social Security to get rid of Social Security and let men be natural?
If the demographics were different, maybe. but I don't think so.
Right.
Fair.
Yeah.
To go back to what Chuck said, it's too bankrolled in. It's too widespread now to just rip it out and then expect like good things will happen. I would imagine a lot of very bad things would happen first before we would see any good from
Well,
it.
we're making the assumption on Nav that there is a way around these problems. Otherwise, what's the point? So I can't agree.
Here's
that
the
it's a
solution.
lost cause.
Give it all to me, and I'll decide who gets what. That's the solution.
Well, I was just
that
saying it
is
would need to be phased out.
monarchy
You need
being
to
a
phase people out.
solution. I think that's kind of the logic behind we need a Caesar. Is like, let's just let some, like, just, I mean, there's some logic there. I don't know.
So,
Chuck, your thoughts?
Well, okay. So two things, and I want to tie this back to your original social contract. Okay. The first thing, which you guys can't see, like I've gone through this with my mother and with relatives. When I was a kid growing up, people hit 70 and died. They just did. If anybody lived to 80, you never met him. My mom lived to be 93. And the problem is, Atlas, you can only save so much. And then people are living these extended lives in which their last decade, they're alive, but they're barely existing. And you're talking about dementia, you're talking about Alzheimer's, you're talking about people that have to have their butts wiped, that have to be fed, and you can't bring these people in the home. We used to bring people into the home. My mom brought my grandmother into the home, but my grandmother lived to a point that my mother and father couldn't care for her. I couldn't take care of my mom, who was wheelchair bound for the last 2 years of her life. And so we've created this scenario that's outside of most people's ability to do that because we're living longer. But the social contract that's entered in today is Rousseau's social contract that said we can collectively as a government take care of everybody's needs. So the government has all these programs like we're going to pay to put somebody in a nursing home because you're not able to take care of them. We're going to pay for this unlimited health care for people whenever they hit 80 and 90 years old because there's no way that a family could afford that, or there's no way that private health care can afford those kinds of things. So we have Medicare and Medicaid. But it's that shift in the social contract that's built that. And that shift has happened so gradually over time, which means this is the battle that we're facing. And you're right. How do we get back to Burke?
Right. And it's just more of one of these things that's very consequential because, when you're getting 8-year projections, and I mean, I think even right now, right, with the food stamps, supposedly 40 million people are going to be kicked off like tomorrow or like in a couple of days. And maybe this will be a rebound thing. Maybe they'll let it sit for a week and then come back and be like, actually, no, we have to actually do this, because what may actually result of that is what I've already seen on TikTok, which is all of these people posting their looting videos. They're going to Walmart, they're going to Aldi, they're going to Kroger, they're looting. And so the expectation that, like Trump's kind of wanting to flex, right? And, going, we're going to cut these benefits off. You're not getting them anymore. And that would have worked some time ago. But like Josh had said, the demographics aren't a bunch of upstanding Christian individuals. And so what we're going to ultimately get is, well, small businesses may suffer because if they're in a bad area and they get food stamp removal out of that bad area, well, they're coming to Joe's Stop Shop and they're going to be taking all of the candy. They're going to be taking all of the drinks, the Mountain Dew. And how do you cooperate with this? How do you interact with that when that question also is not being touched on? And so you can kind of look at these negative feedback loops as they feed into one another. And, I just kind of just feel bad because at the end of the day, it continually is the people who are the tolerant ones who keep taking the brunt of all of the bad.
Let me be the Peter Thiel of the group for a moment. Have we accidentally stumbled upon a truth that maybe, this is dark, it's going to be dark, maybe we shouldn't be letting people live to their 93 to 83? Do we need to go back to like Sparta, where you hit a cutoff age and you chuck them off a cliff? It's like, great life, you made
Let
it.
them sit out on the plains. And
well, that's what they used to do, and some rednecks around here still do it. When your dad starts shitting himself and he literally doesn't know what's happening, you go for a walk in the woods with a shotgun, and that's that. And everybody just kind of understands what happened. I mean, that especially back in nomadic times, you'd hit a point where someone can't keep up, they stay behind, or you put them down. Putting them down is nicer than just leaving them.
Well,
but then you got to live your adult man life with the burden of you're probably putting down like 10, 20 people from your tribe by the time you're their age. And then you know what's coming. Then your mind starts to show, and your little 30-year-old silverback troop leader's like, hey, you want to go for a walk, old man? But are you willing to accept that to solve these problems? Like, I actually am. I do think we hang on way too long. I'm ready to be done with all this nonsense. I feel old already.
Josh, I got a question for Josh, and Atlas. I mean, so this is what you're faced with, and there are big ethical issues here. There truly are.
Well, let me just quickly say this: if we don't solve Social Security, that is what's going to happen to old people. Will it not?
Well, there's a catastrophe coming. You're 100%. But what do you guys think the solution should be? Because, for you and your generation.
Hey, if we took Chuck out for a walk, we'd have 1/4 more resources.
Back, so you guys are in.
We'd all get 25% more time on the show if we just took him for a little walk.
Well, here's what I would say. I think it's unfair to ask that question in a vacuum. I would say if you could visualize, right, and say, here's what we have. It's right. We can have all of these benefit programs that keep people well and pampered and alive all the way with health insurance until they're 84 years old. Or what if on the other side of that is, we have all these programs for children and all this. It's like, if you could do a good visualization of like what else on the other side of that, say we chose not to do that. What's the gain here? What are we not getting because we are doing this? And I think the easiest solution is just a phase out thing. You would just have to start with the people who've paid into it the least, talking about people pre the workforce, anybody who's 17, then maybe 18, and then slowly peel it all the way up. So that way, the first phase out of people out of Social Security are only paying in maybe a fraction of a percentage. So there's not much hit there. And then you go to the next one. And then that gives time for the people who are getting the benefits to then begin to plan around them. With each year, there's kind of like a shrinking element to what they're getting. They can better kind of position themselves to not be, just stuck out on like a half a payment.
I think that Atlas raises a good point on how to actually solve it. But a big part of the reason that we're, and this is kind of the 3,000-foot view, a big part of the reason we are facing any of these problems is the fact that we live in a democracy. And I'm not a full-blown anti-democratic person over here, but the truth is the system as we have it now poses a huge problem. Nobody can ever run, ever, on getting rid of Social Security. It just can't
100%.
happen when they have to get reelected in another 4 years. It's going to take a drastic change to our political system. And I basically, I say it kind of tongue in cheek. And if people say, well, what about this? What about getting into the specifics? Hey, that's what we're here for. We can talk about it. But I think the inevitable solution that will be the best one is some sort of authoritarian small d dictatorship, even if it's just for 10, 15, 20 years. To implement the kind of thing that Atlas is talking about, because what Atlas is talking about ain't going to happen ever if things stay the same.
Well, surely, quickly.
But I just got to say this. You got to hope that the small d dictatorship has your values.
Mine would be a big
D
dictatorship.
If it's me.
Well, I understand.
Mine would be an extra gigantic.
I'll be on my 50 acres, on my compound somewhere going, damn, I was on a podcast before that guy went off.
No, I'm coming for you, Chuck. Your Social Security, we're going to take the Social Security somehow.
I'm already figuring, my future plans don't really envision getting any of it. If I get any of his gravy.
Can Zeb hear me?
Yes.
Is Zeb? Can hear me? Can Zeb put the post from the gospel, the Youth Strikes Back? Because I want Chuck to see this visualization of this ratio here from Senator Amy Klobuchar.
You want the Klobuchar post?
Yeah, if you could just show the ratio for the likes versus the comments on that.
All right, give me
Zeb, are you even listening?
Who's Zeb? Whoa!
That looks like
somebody clip that. That was good.
Looks like a fucking dad who's teaching his kid how to use like a bandsaw for the first time. That was the expression on your face.
Was it not?
We were the second we involved Zeb, first time in an hour.
It freezes.
All right, is this? No, this isn't
perfect.
The one you were wanting.
Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. Perfect.
Okay.
So what you can see here, this right here, guys, is a tweet that has been getting lambasted like crazy. It's from Senator Amy. You guys said it best. She got obliterated. Globuchar, thank you. So this post has almost 10 million views. If Zeb wants to scroll down a little bit there. And it's got almost 7,000 responses to it. It didn't even break a little over 700 likes. And this story specifically is a story about a problem about the fact that she's basically complaining that these people who receive over 130,000 and the wife was like 108,000 in pension funds and IRAs are complaining that their health insurance is going to go up from like 400 to 1,700. And this is kind of showing you the youth doesn't care. The youth is looking at two early retirees, one at 50 and one at 58, taking extreme advantage of the Social Security system and then complaining about other additional entitlements from the health insurance industry as well. So, just to visualize, this is what people think on X. Obviously, 10 million eyes on this and less than 1,000 likes, I think, is very, very telling. And Josh says that no one would be able to run on it. I think we're in the era that people probably could completely omit the older audience as an entire demographic that they have voting for them and just go full youth. And they would probably win.
We're not there yet, but
no, you're not. I would say you got probably 5 to 10 years that you're going to have to, the people that are where people are going to have to age out. And as they begin to age out and get older, they bitch and complain, but they're not as involved and active in voting. So
why would be tapping into the 53% that's not voting?
Right. I hear what you're saying. But the other thing too is we could talk, if you guys ever, is most elections today are decided by independents. Okay. They're not decided by either party. It's either parties are split about 40-40 and it's the 20% in the middle. So you can, if you can sway the independents on this, you have a shot at doing, what you want to do.
I would say that I think that's going to be the old scheme.
Burn it down.
No, I wouldn't burn it down. But I'm just saying, I think that's the traditional scheme. That's the status quo. I think there's room, especially when you look at issues like Israel, right? First time ever across the board between the left and the right, you have the youth is on one side. You have the youth aligning on one side. I would wager expect to see more of that very, very soon. More issues where the youth is aligned against the older generations.
I'm feeling a little Jerry Maguire right now, honestly, when I look to the boomers, my boomer sports players I'm on the phone with as their agent. I'm saying, help me help you. Okay? I still really strongly believe I want to have the concept of Social Security. The old group, the leaders of the tribe get old. You try to help them out. I'm all for that, but it's getting really hard to care if you're not rolling some resources downhill to us. I don't know. Is that accurate? I think again, I just want to hammer points. We want to support older Americans, right? Do we? I think. Do we want to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's from a selfish point of view too. I'd sure love to be somewhat supported if I make it to old age. A little bit, like a peanut butter sandwich every day, glass of milk. What else do old people do, Chuck? You drink milk still?
Invest in having a good relationship with your children. That's the best investment you can make if you want to be taken care of.
Well, no, that's true, Josh. But as I said, what's happening is medical science is keeping the body alive to the point where you're existing. I saw this growing up as a kid, where my family would bring the parents or whoever it was into the home, but those parents would be ambulatory. They would die of strokes. They would die of heart attacks. They would die of cancer because the treatments weren't what they were. So they were still ambulatory. They could still go take a shit and wipe their ass. Okay. They could feed themselves. Whereas the problem is that we tried this with my parents. We tried this and we knew we couldn't do it with my mom. They get ambulatory. Well, she paid for her care all the way through, but they lose the ability to take care of themselves. So you might have a person in your home who is partially with dementia, or has to have their butt wiped, or has to be taken to the bathroom, or has to be sat down and spoon fed, and you're just not capable of doing it. People,
you got to go work and stuff.
You got to go to work and all of that. You got kids or whatever. So it's not that easy. Well, there is one thing that can be done, and we did this with my mom, which is medical science says if a person's like 90 years old and they get sick, if they're in a nursing home or something, or you're at home, if the doctor says you're sick, he's required to prescribe like antibiotics if you get some form of pneumonia. okay, or else he's going to get his ass sued. So anything that he finds medically, he must treat with a medication. But you could just look at your parent and go, we're pulling all your meds. You know, you got a beta blocker, you're done. You know, at 85, if you don't know where you're at in the house, we're pulling your beta blocker, and you're probably going to die of a heart attack. You know, we're going to pull if you get a upper respiratory infection, you're not going to get any antibiotic. And you know that you're going to go out at that point. So there are things like that, but it's brutal on families.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Then you got to live with, like, if you didn't have to live with that decision, it would probably be a good system, but you do.
But that's only one element. But I feel your pain from the standpoint of where you guys are at and the problems that you're going to have to end up solving.
Well, is that, Chuck, is that like so eating meat is one of these things now. I promise I'm going to bring this back quickly. Like, I know so many people now that are grossed out by even like chicken from the grocery store, which is already pretty broken down, or like, and then you go to the amount of people that would butcher a live animal and you get almost zero. However, that is a supernatural and fundamental part to eating meat that we sort of lost as we've domesticated ourselves. Is it natural? Like, Social Security is a brand new phenomenon for most of human history.
You're saying we should eat the elderly?
Well,
there you go.
Your tribe has X amount of resources. Your elderly hit a point where it's no longer reasonable to use those resources to keep them alive. Whatever you hit that point is when you're going to either start pulling their beta blockers or taking them out into the woods or whatever. That is the threshold, is whenever it becomes too costly to keep them alive. If you remove Social Security, I think that age number is going to drop by like 30 years of when they start becoming too costly. You know, it might start happening at 40. I don't know. But is that an eating meat thing? Is it actually quite natural? Are we just supposed to be emotionally stronger, that you do take out your parents and aunt and uncles at a certain age in your 40s or 50s, and you just ought to be able to deal with that like you ought to be able to butcher a cow?
Oh,
is it a matter of looking at it the wrong way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole idea of like, do men and women and everybody need to be emotionally tougher? Like, I don't even think that's a question. I think obviously we have lost that.
Let's make it personal, Atlas and Josh. Your father, grandfather, no longer, you're the alpha of the tribe of primates, and your father's become a burden. Could you do it? And could you live with it? And could you teach your son to do it to you? That's kind of what you're asking of them. I think.
I guess if the question is as simple as just pulling the plug, I think yes. I think I could. I mean, I personally have watched my father go through this with his own grandma and grandpa. As this year, lost my grandma shortly, a long time ago, and then my mom on her side lost my grandmother actually almost 2 years ago now, and they had the strength to do it. You know, and maybe my family's not indicative of every family around the country, but they saw the point when this is basically just giving painkillers to extend a problem. And so, yeah, they ask, like, let's not do this. And part of it is they're too realizing what Chuck had said, which is part of the health industry is basically owned by insurance. So that doctor has to do what he's basically outlined in his job to do, or he faces liability issues on that end. And again, I'll say this all the time, but these negative feedback loops just constantly feed into each other. It's like this categorically affects this category, and then this category affects that category, and it's just one big mess. And the solution has to start somewhere.
In terms of this is relevant to a social contract. So the social contract become remove Social Security and just start killing old people or whatever. But this is there's something interesting and new happening with people alive right now in their 70s and 80s. It's this desperate need to live forever. I get that kind of gets selected for because all the people from that generation that weren't like that are probably dead already. Like, so there probably were a lot of them that weren't like that. And now we're just left with the few remaining 5% of boomers that all desperately wanted to live forever. So they all seem to be that way, which I don't think they were. But
I think, so to go back to what you were saying about people being emotionally tougher, I mean, I've lived kind of through this transition. They were tougher. and they understood that people died and that there wasn't a way for medicine to cure every issue and to give us this, perceived immortality that we accept as being the norm today. But then it did make the shift. And now today people feel as though that with medical science, they're just entitled to have this. And, but it's, I also think it's part of the social contract because, Atlas, from the beginning, you had talked about more of that Burkean, Lockean model where, it's up to you, save your money, come up with a plan, and your kids will take care of you until you don't know your name. And then they're pulling all of your meds. Whatever that might be is for individuals and families to have, but not today. We're looking to the government. And that was part of the article I said. I made this point in the article was, everybody screams about entitlement. But are you willing to bring your family member out of a nursing home to your home, if they're not even ambulatory, to take them through their end stages of life? And the answer is no, because the government has always stepped in to pay for nursing care in a nursing home once a family exhausted their resources. So this is where the battle of these contracts come in. Rousseau versus, Burke and Locke. And it's a large part of what the battle is, that we're fighting, and particularly when everybody gets, their nose in the trough for at least a short period of time for ways that materially benefit them.
And an element that swirls around this is, again, with the social contract, but Christianity, right? In what you had said, emotionally tougher was also because these people were also a lot more Christian than you could say the general population is nowadays. And when you're Christian, you don't fear death. You have a different worldview of what death means, right? It's an acceptance of this is the natural way of life. This is as God intended it. This is the design of God. But when you have a population that doesn't believe in that, they fear death. And so they make much worse decisions because they're all clawing to life. They're all clinging to material things. They're all clinging to financials. And that's where I think, again, Christianity has to be like the major underpin of all of this. That has to be what gets installed first, because it does subsequently touch.
I'm chuckling because Josh and I and Zeb have said this. I've said this all along, that it was this Christian worldview, Old and New Testament, that was the glue, the virtue that underpinned the American story of its original vision and that original contract. And part of this book that I'm writing is we're entering into a post-Christian era, not another secular era, a post-Christian era. And all of these things, all the presumptions of that were underpinning what we lived a certain way because we didn't want to go break our beliefs or be involved in the social shame of not living to that virtue that really drove so much of America until we began to disconnect from that. And now we're just in like this neo-pagan free-for-all. And we're losing the underpinnings.
Well, there was a time where living too old was shameful. And in fact, you can even go back at least World War I, if not II. There was like British soldiers who killed themselves because they were disallowed from joining the military because they had flat feet or something like that. Or you were massively ostracized for not signing up to serve in the military. There was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, where especially as a man, maybe only as a man, but you were kind of a loser if you lived too long. It was like, look at this old idiot who never went into a battle. What a pussy. And then I guess if you're talking about how to change us back to something more like that, you would need a strong leader who said something similar. I don't know. Somebody's
right.
talking.
Well, would you say, this is a question for you guys, is there even honor among men anymore? Would you say that we have even a semblance of what used to be exist in a previous culture, even in the Wild West, right? They'd count paces, right?
I try to convince myself. Yeah, I'd like interacting with Zeb, getting to know you guys. I know I'm a weird asshole and all that, but and with Chuck too. Like we try to maintain honorable discourse and not being personal for the sake of figuring stuff out. But most people, I'd say no.
I grew up with World War II veterans. My dad was a World War II veteran. You want to talk about honor and masculinity? I mean, I grew up with, but I will say this again. The destruction of what we understood as traditional masculinity that came from a biblical worldview, that's postmodernity, period.
Did your father give a shit about living to like 100? Did he ever say anything like, God, I wish I could live a really long time.
No, he lived to almost be 90 as a World War II veteran and a child who went through the Depression. And that's what medical science has done to us, has done for us. And you guys are going to, you guys are going to understand, you guys are going to benefit from this. Okay. I turned 60 this year. All right. I'm in bed. I talked to my best friend about this, who's 60 also. When our fathers were 60, or the people that we were growing up with as kids were 60, they were done. I mean, they were literally done. They lived to be 65 and died. And I took my son backpacking in Colorado on a 21-mile backpacking trip. And he's like, I don't know if I know an 18-year-old, I don't know anybody my age who could have done what you did. So if you work at keeping your health and you work out, we are extending our lives, and you guys are going to benefit from that, for being able to live into your 60s, 70s, and almost 80s by being able to do things that no other generations could. But you're going to face the downside. There's the problems we've talked about.
And that's the X factor in everything, is the innovation of technology and the fact that no one can actually accurately predict its exponential ability to, fast forward in time, depending on what industry a new invention will touch on. And that's the thing too. That's kind of like everything's bad, but there is the benefit that because everybody has air conditioning, because there's a hospital in a bajillion different urban centers, that we do have access to all these things. There are benefits to it. It's just, are these benefits even meaningful compared to all of the costs that are going on? And I say this pretty often too. And, in the physical sense, and I'm glad you touched on this, in the physical sense, the body is alive, but we're in a period where I'm telling you, I think the average person, everybody, my dad, my mother, children, teenagers, it feels that the average person is one bad day away from a psychotic break. And it's there's now a mental element in this, right? They're people are clearly what's the word? Disturbed is maybe a good word. They are on edge. And what is that coming from? What's this root cause of that? Because I think that plays into the fact of everybody having these bad social interactions because everybody's on some level miserable.
I love it, Alex. We're all pre-Joker over here. That's what's going on these days.
I'm so far down that road, and you say it, and I laughed because it was true. I'm like, yeah, we're all done.
I want to get y'all's thoughts on this. So, talking solutions here. You know how Israel, they require 2 years mandatory military service?
Yep.
What about the youth, or basically it varies based on age, but basically mandated community service that everyone has to do, and it varies. Teenagers might have to work in retirement homes or something, or something like that. We can get kind of creative with it.
What would immediately happen is anybody with wealth and power would write into that law some sort of exception, just like they did with wars. It's my rich kid doesn't have to do that, though.
Even a year of just working in a retirement home?
The rich people will find ways for their kids to not have to do that shit. I guarantee you.
True, but the rich are always going to do that no matter what system. The poor taking care of the poor, I'm okay with that.
Well, so this is what I'm going back to what I said. You start to pay people to do something they would have done anyways when shit goes down. What you want. I'm not saying this is easy, but there was a time, your parents, they all joined without having to be told, right? All the men.
Well, in World War II, very few people tried to get out of service.
That's what I mean.
They let themselves be drafted.
Some people killed themselves because they couldn't.
But during the great, and Josh, you're right, and this goes back to this concept of social contract and breakdown. During the Depression, okay, there was the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, where guys didn't want to take welfare. So what part of what Roosevelt did is he set aside all this money. They built national parks. They built dams. If you travel throughout Pennsylvania, you can go to national parks that had small dams that were built to provide these small lakes within these parks during the Depression. And today, guess what? They're falling apart because, it's like if you get welfare, you should be made to work. But the other side of this contract, okay, this other side that says government can take care of everything, and as a collectivist society, we're going to be able to take care of you. We should be able to take care of you. They're never going to permit that. But I agree with you 100%, Josh. But the shift came whenever we began to lose this social contract.
And we're probably not going to get it back either. It's going to warp. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. And that's, I think, probably what you're looking at, right, with your book, right? A post-Christian era. It's like this is the next evolution of what it will become.
Right. I mean, what if you want to talk about, Atlas? What did Paul say to Timothy? Those who don't work don't eat.
Right.
It's all
very that it's worse, right? It's worse for them to not provide than for them to be an unbeliever, right? There is a clear.
You can't provide for your family or 100%.
I think God will give us a little bit of grace because we are in uncharted waters, like masses of people not working. And now you're seeing people online, who aren't going to be getting their EBT. They're all like in mass threatening to riot. This is something that has never happened ever to my knowledge. And so
no,
I think the solutions will be drastic. Hopefully God will understand.
I believe there have got to be many, many examples throughout recorded history, which is 6,000 years, roughly, if you count China. But I think we owe it to ourselves on maybe the next show or next time we get back on this topic as soon as possible. Where else has this already happened? Like Cuba. We can go right back to the Cold War in Cuba and Castro taking over with Che and then how it all just fell apart. And then the state it's in now. But there's been plenty. It happened in Rome, right? And you had the Optimates and the Populares. I know everybody knows Caesar. You guys familiar with Sulla? Yes, you know.
Yeah, heard it, but I don't know what you're referring to.
You need Sulla before go read about. Is it Marcus Cornelius Sulla? Do you know? You Rome guy, Chuck?
No, but
Sulla, Sulla.
Sulla. Go read about him. So I think we can probably see this happening in Rome. I'm sure we can find examples of it happening in Greece. I'm sure we could find examples of it happening in fucking Parthia, man.
Well, your thing about Rome is apt from the standpoint of the parallels to America are there was a breakdown in their social and there was a breakdown in their own social contract, and they all of a sudden found out that the people could vote themselves largesse through the government. And when that happened, exactly what we're doing here. What people don't understand is the collapse of Rome happened over a very long period of time. And it happened through
and then the
East
kept going for another 1,000 years. So.
Yeah, so it just crumbled around them, which is likely what we're going to experience, here.
But damn, man, even a lot of our government and country, and look at the buildings in D.C. are modeled after Rome. It's the most recent empire, and the British, but they were a little more. But we can look at the British. I'm just saying. I think there's actually lots of societies we can find recorded examples of where this went wrong. We can find their philosophers and politicians have written about. So you can go read shit Caesar wrote when he was in Britain. That shit's out there. And say, what did they think about it? What did they do to go about fixing it? Did they fix it? If they didn't, why not? And is there any examples of someone who did turn something like this around? Maybe there is. I don't know.
Good idea. I'm down.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think this in principle or in concept or big picture wise is new. I think this has happened a lot of times. Personally.
Oh, yeah.
Someone can disagree, but.
I mean, this is the story, right? Someone said it in chat as well, too. Like, there's always going to be a class system. There's always going to be some party that's like not getting what they want. And, just reading a little bit there on Sola, right, is basically his march through his unmatched power. And that's kind of the idea, right, is a lot of when you're reading history, it's not the parts that are in bold font aren't won an election, right? The part that's in bold font is, took Rome. Revolution kicked off here, right? Like shots were fired here. And so I think to just admit that.
Yeah, right? He's particularly interesting because while he allowed the Republic or Rome to continue for 1,000 more years, he also was the final nail in the coffin, because once he marched on Rome, then it was okay to march on Rome. And then a bunch of people started marching on Rome. But things had gotten so corrupt that he just sort of was like, you know what, fuck this. And he just went and killed all the corrupt. He just took over as a dictator. And it worked. But what it did was plant the seed for all the future dictators to do the same fucking thing. And that's what ultimately destroyed the empire. So even that strategy does not work. I think also a fair question is, does any strategy work? Are we just in this for the ride? Anyway,
it's just got to be a complete circumvention, right? Same way, like that's why I think accelerationism. Has accelerationism ever been tried in America? Right? Has real acceleration ever been tried in America?
Has it ever been? But
That's
isn't
kind of the way I see
acceleration?
it.
That's an acknowledgement that you have no control over any of this, and so it's all going down. So why not just get there sooner so we can start coming back up again? Like that's
true, but you're going to have a plan to come back up with. You know, the worst thing you can do is push this to crumble without having some level of a united, vision to emerge into, and that's going to be critical.
That's how it degrades into like warlords and dictators, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And so for Josh and Zeb and Atlas, I mean, the question for you guys is, you could talk about the new American vision, but how are you going to define that new American vision? And what are the principles that are going to, what are the principles that are going to define its social contract? And how are you going to sell those to people and unite people around those?
Well, also maybe a good example we should look at is the American Revolution, because they're kind of did the same fucking thing, didn't they? Look at all this going to shit. Let's sit down. Let's first define what we are, what we care about, and what we want to be. I think Chuck's making a great point. Like, hard to get people to agree on the vision if we don't know what it is.
And the other thing to remember there too is, for one, how old they were. I think that's also another historical thing. If you look at the track record, it's typically the men in their prime. Second thing, to the addition of that, is they weren't in the majority. They affected change without needing the majority. And so this idea that we need to have compromises or unite with a bigger, greater force, I think it's not part of the equation. It's, do we have enough power to overtake the majority is the question. Now, whether that's numbers or assets or something else. Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Most takeover, and Cuba's another example. It was a core leadership group with a bunch of NPCs. That's how the Bolsheviks,
10 to 20%. And if you can infuse your positions into the right institutions and then get enough people to give you the minimum levels of support you need, you can effect a tremendous amount of change. But ultimately, but most of these revolutions that you talk about, whether it was Cuba or whether it was the Soviet Union, within these countries, they had suffered some levels of poverty and ongoing from generation to generation. They were willing to try anything at that point in time. They just didn't know what they were buying into. So you still had to have the greater society willing to go, okay, we're willing to at least give this a shot. Unfortunately, once they did, they were screwed in ways that they could never extract themselves from.
Well, even worse so, if you look at the examples of the founding fathers, right? You have stories of wives turning them into the loyalists. You have stories of cousins trying to turn people in, own brothers, split family households.
100%.
So that is kind of the idea that I try to push a lot on my own show, which is like, you need to have the conviction to be able to plant seeds for a tree in which you will never sit in the shade beneath. And if you don't have that, you need to find the door. I mean, this is about taking great sacrifices, great risks. And I always draw the point and conclusion to my own self and my own personal life, which is like, I bring this up often and they don't like it, but it's part of the reality. Not so much my own personal family, but my wife's family. And many people who are connected to that, they see stuff that I say and stuff that I'm willing to put my name behind, and they go, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. This guy's insane. He's racist. He's ushered out of society. And understand how much that inflicts pain upon my wife, having to defend me to her own parents, right? But these are the risks that you have to be willing to burden on if you actually want to affect change. But that's what I see when I go to Walmart. I don't see men like that. I see a bunch of guys with their heads buried down wanting to play Pokemon. I go to a restaurant. I think, what would happen if, a fire burst into the kitchen over there? Well, half of the restaurant's going to be looking at me because I'm the only guy over 6 foot. They're going to be like, concerned on being able to help them. So that's what I'm kind of very concerned about.
Fucking true, isn't it? Anytime anything goes wrong in public now, I feel like every woman just turns and looks at me. They're like, oh,
not to be self-aggrandizing, but to make a point over like people.
What do you want me to do? Go fucking punch his bullets?
Well, part of what you're understanding about the loss of masculinity is wound up within the loss of the those principles that undergirded the contract, and that concept of masculinity was a large part of that contract.
I do think men are willing to be that guy, but they've taken away the they want you to fight the grizzly bear, but then also get thrown in jail afterwards when you slap your wife's ass. It's like you either get both guys or none. You got to deal with a little ass slapping if you want the grizzly bear guy. You just gotta.
Right. And listen, this is my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is attacking men who are at the leash of their wives, who live in complete inversion of God's natural order. And that is why, quite frankly, I have bigger problems with the Republican Party. They're a bunch of wolves in sheep's clothing. They go, I'm a conservative, I'm a Christian. And then they do everything that is not that, while also leading lives and family examples that is absolutely subversive and detrimental to that. And that's what, part of the problem is that, and we do need to recapture a lot of the Republican Party. And even if it is, very meaningless and incremental, it does need to happen. And even if it's for, cute internet points, I'm still going to take shots at JD Vance and all these people who are cucked, for lack of better words.
Oh yeah, we got a lot more shot taking going on for sure. It's time. It's time to pull
Let's
our nuts
go,
out,
guys. The new American vision will be realized. Yeah. As soon as we can figure out what that means.
It will be. It will be. The revolution will not be televised, but it will include balls. That's why it won't be televised.
We need like a dick reference tally. I think we're up to 6 for this episode.
We can do better. Those are rookie numbers.
Those are rookie numbers. You need to pump up those numbers.
You guys know what I'm doing? What's that fucking
The
movie?
new American Vision is walking around with your nuts out. Got it.
It's got to be mimetic. It's got to be a little bit of fun or something. But
how else do you assert dominance?
That's how you assert dominance. Well, so just the thought on the 20% of people leading a revolution. I mean, is that not further evidence that humans are a hierarchical animal? That this NPC, all these different ways of saying the same thing have come out now on the internet. So the NPC, there's this huge group of people, maybe 80%. That number even gets thrown out. Yeah. What's the 20% of the people do 80% of the work? That's a real equation they found. There you go. Yeah. What is it?
Pareto principle.
Pareto. Oh, isn't it? Well, there's a specific. Okay, yeah. So anyway, Pareto. You're right. I should have just said that. But if an entire country can be taken over by a small group of conscious individuals, I mean, it's sort of implying that hierarchy is real.
Oh, even smaller.
And I mean, every other animal that's close to us, from chimpanzees. I mean, the term would be pack animal, because pack animals form hierarchies out of necessity, because somebody's got to be in charge, and some people have to not be in charge. So I kind of wonder if, like in wolves, the alpha's conscious and the rest are kind of NPCs, or chimpanzees or whatever. So, but yeah. I think we're in denial that all men are created equal. Needs some more detail in there to get a little more at exactly what's going on. But yeah, I am convinced, having worked with primates, that we are exactly the same, just more complicated. And we care about abstract. Our hierarchy depends on shit that like is unnatural. Like, who has the biggest tits? Just doesn't, like, chimps don't care, man. They'll bang anything. Every chimp is hot. All chimps are
monkeys 10. Believe in God.
No, dude. They don't believe in shit. They believe in power. The chimpanzees are the third world. Same society. Literally the same. Power. Biggest, scariest, angriest attitude guy is in charge, fucks all the women. Eventually, a younger guy gets bigger than him, kills him, fucks all the women, including his mom and sisters. Most of the babies are deformed, horrible retards and die, but once in a while, a few of them turn out okay, and it just keeps on turning, and they're just loving every second of it.
Okay.
Well, boys. I've been very background this episode.
How are you?
We're coming up on about 5 or 6 more minutes. If y'all want.
Oh, is that Zeb Boykin? Is Zeb here?
Who? Where?
He joined us.
With the hair.
But yeah, we coming up on like 5 more
You look
minutes
like
left. If y'all want to add anything else, talking about the social contract that we have with the younger and older generations, and then the Social Security discussion that we had for the back half, the last hour. If y'all want to add anything else before we kind of close this thing up, we got about, like I said, 5-6 more minutes.
Yeah, sorry for the late start there. Any final, Chuck? I've been making a fool of myself.
I'll go first. I just have one last thing I'll say, and it's kind of actually just tagging on to one of the last things you had said, and that's the idea of the 20%. And I argue less than that, 5%. You could go super low, to be honest with you. But this idea that you don't have to even look that far back in history. Just look what the left has been doing over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? The vocal minority. How often has this been described as like there's a very minor faction that is basically commandeering the entire party because they're the loudest? They don't take no for an answer. And with that, I mean, the playbook's right there. It's the issue is, it's like, why is the right not using it? It's like their playbook sucks. Use the lefts. It's like, we get a new head coach in there, start running those plays, because that's what we need. And that'd be my final piece on that.
I'm looking at your.
Yeah, I think it's time. Whatever our disagreements may be, whatever the cause of the problems may be, we all know there's time. It's time for something to change, and that's what I'm encouraged about this movement, about this network of the New American Vision. John Ward, myself, Atlas, and Zeb, and Chuck, figuring out, based on the past, present, how to go into the future. So I'm excited for it, guys.
Surprise.
I didn't get the cue. You know, I got to say, Atlas, I am, and all of you guys. I was very surprised and really excited to see that you're going back to people like Burke, and understanding that there are much deeper issues here beyond the emotional content and the concern that we have. And you know, America's past was defined by a very clear social contract, and America's future, I think, needs to be having a social contract redefined, which means a lot of work talking about these underpinning values and what it means and how we live those in a contemporary society. You know, and that's really exciting because you know, for me, having lived through my time in America, there was no way for any of this to be possible without the internet. And you guys are fortunate to be in such a time that you have this kind of platform to get a voice out there, because prior to that, it would have been impossible. So
Super well said, Chuck. Yeah, I agree. The internet is a tool. I think we're all making an honest attempt to use it appropriately, except for maybe me, as you see by Joe Boo. I think I'm using it the way it'll be used 1,000. I'm just ahead of all of you, frankly. But no, having these discussions requires an amazing amount of self-control and willingness to hear other people out on the belief that when they say things you disagree with, that they're being honest. I know Chuck is. I know you young guys are. And there's all kinds of fights we're going to have here in the near future, I think, about certain particular specific things. But there are definitely still plenty of people out there, not just ourselves, but in the chat as well, who care. And I do agree. I think we've identified that it is a social contract issue, and that it's an issue because it no longer has any meaning, or the meaning is changed and left it behind. And so, yes, I too look forward to continuing this discussion and finalizing the things we figure out. I will always push for. So you know, the things we learned today in Atlas's document, what was revealed, what was figured out, what do we agree on, that kind of stuff. It'll be a long show. We'll go for years and years, I hope. So we'll see where we get.
Gentlemen, that is the Founders Show for NAV on Sunday. We went through a good bit of information today. I think we laid the groundwork for kind of where we're going. And this is going to be a long process, just like John said. A lot of this is going to be laying the groundwork. And so we have disagreements, we have agreements, we have a generational divide between us that we're going to have to understand each other and move forward from that. And we obviously, even to the point of definitions, not just semantics, but definitions in themselves. And we're going to have to define what the goal for NAV is. What is NAV itself? And that's where we're going. I think we have an idea. We all have an idea of a direction that we're going to. Where is the end goal? That's what we're after. And to do that, we are going to look at the past. We're not only just going to look at their failures, but also their successes. And then we're going to take from that and apply today what we can. Obviously, today we face a different opposition. We have different problems that they didn't have to face, that haven't existed prior to specifically technology. I would even chalk it up to the multiculturalism and the loss of identity that we have today. I mean, you could probably, Rome was mentioned earlier. You could probably tie a little bit of that to Rome. But what we have to understand is that even in our disagreements, we are trying to sharpen each other. That's what we're here for. We're not here to attack each other. And I am enjoying the conversation. I hope Chad is too. But thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. All of our links are in the description. Actually, I'll get Chuck's in there here in a second. Y'all go check out, follow everybody from here, and then obviously share this out if you can. If you thought this was a decent conversation, if you want to, please clip some of it. Maybe you found something you agreed with. Maybe you found something you disagree with. Please clip it up. Send it out. But this is the new American vision, and we are going to define that moving forward. All we want is a safe place for our kids to grow up in a place that looks like America. And we will catch you next Sunday. Thank you.
I stand before you today, a free man, no chains, no masters.
Lost power and rammed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge in the spring, causing it to collapse.
The words that the Key Bridge is gone, it still shakes us. 6
construction workers on the bridge were killed. Hurricane season brought Helene and Milton, storms that devastated parts of the South. Helene killed more than 100 people in North Carolina alone. Protests over the Israel-Hamas war escalated on college campuses. Police clashed with demonstrators across the country while clearing out encampments. Some universities had their commencement ceremonies disrupted, while others canceled their main graduation altogether. The man accused of murdering Georgia nursing student Laken Riley was found guilty in November. Venezuelan migrant Jose Ibarra, who entered the U.S. illegally, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In December, a gunman killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in front of a Midtown Manhattan hotel.
It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes.
The 5-day manhunt ended at a Pennsylvania McDonald's, where police arrested a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate. 2024 marked the first time parents launched 2 NASA astronauts into space for the first time with its Starliner spacecraft. But problems plagued the planned 8-day mission, leaving the astronauts stranded on the International Space Station.
The 4th day of rallies and protests on the streets of Los Angeles.
It was a peaceful rally. What is going on right now is also peaceful.
We are expecting rallies later on.
When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
In Los Angeles, there is a new crowd of protesters that has been building.
CNN had it that these were rallies. Now they've become protests. I'm afraid that by tonight they become riots. If we don't have the ability to stand up and stop this violence before it consumes a great city like Los Angeles, then there's no telling where this could spread.
Let's stop talking. Talking's over. They still want to shoot you. They killed Charlie Kirk. They praised it. They want Donald Trump. They want Chirachik. They want anyone they associate with the right. They want to kill them. They brag about this. They continue on with this. It's been over a month and they're still going on about it. At some point, you got to say, hey, maybe that's me too.
Hello, world champions. I'm John Ward, and today on Breaking News, we are breaking the fake lie continuum. Get ready for 1.21 gigawatts, McFly, because your mind is a boomer expat, and this episode is the Bangkok Ladyboy Softball Club, and hardballs are also okay too. Also, that club. Sorry, we know good English. And what I mean by that is, not only is your mind about to be blown more times than a lead in a LeBron James Finals series, it's going to get blown in ways you don't want it to. A horror in the midst of which you will realize this is the real soul crusher. You're paying for it.
A free man, no chains.
Compromise, but it is a compromise nonetheless going to have to be made if we are to ever revamp and rework the system, ultimately in an attempt to circumvent any kind of violent revolution.
This is the future. There is nothing left for us to do. They have taken it away from, they have stolen it from us. They are thieves. They have no idea what is coming.